with shorter days and the temperatures continuing to drop, many feel what is known as seasonal affective disorder, often shortened to seasonal depression or SAD. And it's not a well-known aspect of mental health. Some even question its legitimacy. And here to talk with us today about it is seasonal affective disorder is Dr. Larry Huszar, a family doctor at Lancaster General Hospital. Thank you so much for coming in, Doc. We appreciate it.
Good to be here.
Yeah, well, we got a lot to get to in a short period of time, but I want to talk to you because it's interesting. Just the other day, I was mentioning to someone, or they were mentioning to me, how they wake up and it's dark, they go to bed and they come home and it's dark, and they were saying they were feeling depressed. And another friend of ours was saying, well, that's not real. That's just, you may just be feeling sad. But I was stunned because I was like, well, everybody knows seasonal depression is a thing. So you, in fact, say that it is a real thing. And how would you define it?
Yeah, so seasonal affective disorder can be considered a subset of depression, but for many people with this actual SAD diagnosis, it's going to go into full remission during other times of the year. So people that feel great during the spring and summer times, but then get down, depressed, sad, or even sometimes bipolar during the winter time would qualify as having that diagnosis.
So it's interesting because I read your article, and what I learned from it is that anybody, number one, can be impacted by this, but there are a couple of people who are in certain groups who have higher risk of dealing with this. Is that correct?
Yes, that is true. So some folks that would have a family history of seasonal affective disorder would be higher risk. We often find that people that live in northern latitudes where there is less daylight during the winter times, or female gender, and even younger adults compared to older adults do have a higher risk as well.
So, Doc, what are the signs and symptoms of this, right? So, or I should say, what are the signs and symptoms, and how does one know, and how can one differentiate when they're actually dealing with SAD or seasonal depression, as many people know it, versus just dealing with, a difficult day?
Sure. So seasonal affective disorder is going to be something that continues to persist. It's not just like one day you feel poorly and then another day you feel great. So it's going to be lasting through that season. But a lot of the typical symptoms of depression are often there, such as of depressed mood, lack of interest or motivation to do things they would normally like, sometimes guilt or hopelessness. Many times with SAD, you can often see more of issues with extreme fatigue, feeling tired all the time, wanting to sleep more, also carbohydrate cravings, and even some weight gain, perhaps as a result of that.
Yeah, so craving carbs is one of those things where,
absolutely.
I like crave carbs often, so I don't know what that says, but so talk also too a little bit about the fact that, folks I think are also wondering out there, how can you combat it, right? What are some of the ways that you can actually combat this condition? Because so many people who may even recognize that this is what they have will just say, well, I guess I got to wait till spring or summer. You don't have to wait. There are things that you can do.
No, absolutely not. And you can, a lot of people like going through natural measures to try to help themselves feel better. And I feel like the light box or light device is a great way of doing that. It does have scientific evidence behind it. So you're looking for about 2,500 up to 10,000 lux that you would get 30 to 60 minutes every morning. You don't have to be staring at the box. You can actually be doing other things, but kind of facing in that general direction. Even just increasing your daylight exposure if you get a chance on a lunch break or another break during work to get out, to get some sun exposure, to go for a walk perhaps. So those are some things that you can do kind of naturally with the light therapy. And then there are other modalities as well.
So our producer was telling me about the happy lights, or what they call happy lights. So talk a little bit about that too. That's just a light you have in your room or something you can have in an office space?
Yeah, and some of them may come from a specific medical supply store, but even you can go on Amazon, as you can find almost anything there, and find lots of these types of devices and buy one that would have a similar amount of lux, LUX, like I mentioned. And that could be a beneficial thing to try, and they seem to be also very safe. The amount of lux that you would get, for instance, from the sun is far more than what you would get from one of these light boxes.
And can you also talk about, is there any vitamins or supplements or exercise? Is any of that also helping with this too?
Yeah, so vitamin D sometimes can be lower in the wintertime, and so theoretically it might be some vitamin D deficiency, although that's never really played out in the studies. However, a small dose of a vitamin D supplement, even around 1,000 to 2,000 units daily, could be useful to try, and if it helps, that's great. If it doesn't seem to make much difference. But other options would include prescription medications. Meds that have been studied more for this would include fluoxetine, also called Prozac, or sertraline, brand name Zoloft, and those have some evidence of benefit. We also find that even just doing some of the natural things that you would do for depression anyway could likely help with seasonal affective disorder, such as exercise, socialization, being with other people, investing in spiritual health. journaling or keeping a thankfulness journal. A lot of those things don't have the studies for SAD, but are very likely to help as well.
So there's so many things that can be done to be able to combat. You just don't have to wait till another season.
Absolutely. Take advantage of what you can do in the wintertime. Get out, get some sunlight, get some light therapy, medications if needed, and get some time with other people too.
And I should ask, when, if the light boxes aren't working, or if a certain medication isn't working, when do you know if you need to maybe take it a step further and really see someone about this?
Well, some of the alarm symptoms would be if you can't function, you're not getting through your day, not able to participate in your work or family activities. Certainly we'd be much more concerned too if people are having symptoms of suicidal thoughts or ideas, and in those cases absolutely we'd want people to get to their doctor's office, talk with them through that, and see what the best next step would be.
Well, I think this is really going to be a help to people. So Dr. Huszar, thank you so much
All right.
for coming in.
Thank you, glad to be here.
Thank you. And you can take a look at our website if you're interested in learning more. You can read Dr. Huszar's article on seasonal affective disorder by going to WGAL.com.